Alright guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Onua shown here. Now today we want to take our Docker Compose knowledge a bit further. We want to use it to deploy an open source learning management platform that is called Moodle. Alright, now Moodle, it's an LMS platform that was built with PHP. All right, and we want to take this application that is open source and we want to use Docker to basically deploy, all right, this particular application. Now, in one of the previous videos that we did, we already saw how to deploy a WordPress website using a shell script. In today's video, we want to basically see how we can install and deploy the Moodle LMS using the concept of containerization. Is that okay? Now, like I said, Moodle is a learning management platform that is open source that you can use in your universities, in your high school, all right, or within your organization, to basically, teach your student or your workers or staff members. If there are courses that you offer, you can leverage Moodle LMS, all right, to, teach your courses, because it allows you to integrate a lot of plugins, right? I mean, there's assignment plugin, there's payment plugin, there's, quiz plugin where you can do assessment for people. And it also has a certificate plugin such that after, your learners or your student or your staff members have completed a course, they can actually get a certificate, afterwards. So today, we want to see how we can deploy this particular application with the concept of containerization. All right. Now, I use Moodle myself, and, for those that will be joining the cohort that I'm starting in January 2025, we're going to be leveraging the Moodle LMS to, share, the course material, the video, and some other things that we would want to share with the audience, and including, certificates, and for those who are interested. All right. And this is, how my own Moodle LMS site looks like. I mean, I've done a lot of tweaking to this one. All right. And, this is what it looks like. So today, this that you see right here on my screen is what we actually want to deploy with the concept of containerization. Okay, without wasting much of your time, let's get right into today's video. All right, now we're going to start. Of course, we need a Docker file. All right, and then we need a Docker Compose file as well. Now, before we start writing a Docker file, before we start, writing a Docker Compose file for a Moodle LMS application, the first thing you do before you even install any application is to understand what are the requirements for this application. So I want to install Moodle LMS. So what are the things that Moodle LMS needs to function? Okay, so I need to understand it. So what are the, software requirements? What are the hardware requirements? All right, browser requirements and things like that. Because that will give me an idea of what I need to install, how to install it. And of course, if there are dependencies, all right, that I need to install, I need to also figure out how to install those dependencies. Okay, and, what are the dependencies that I need? What are the ones that I don't need? And, things like that. All right. So here, if you click on download Moodle LMS 4, it will take you straight to the website. And of course, right here, I have, opened that up for us. So the latest version of Moodle LMS is Moodle 4.5. That's the latest version. And it was released on the 7th of October, 2024. Okay. And if you look at what you have here, you have the server requirement. Okay. Now it says that Moodle upgrade, 4.12 or later, requires a PHP version, the minimum version, okay, of 8.10, which means, in order for your Moodle to even run at all, you need a PHP 8.1.0 version. That is the minimum. So it means that even if you have PHP 8.3 or 8.4 even, right, you can still run the Moodle LMS. But the minimum that you need for this Moodle application to run is the PHP 8.1.0. So that's the minimum. Now, if you look at what you have here also, it tells you that this PHP extension, which is the Sodium extension, has to be installed or enabled, right, as part of the PHP extension that you need. Another thing also is that it says the PHP settings, all right, max input variable, all right, should be greater or equal to 5,000. Okay, so that is also another requirement. So these are things that you need to note before you start writing your Docker file or writing, the Docker Compose file and all of that. Now, if you scroll down also, you have the database requirements. Now, Moodle, being a PHP application, all right, works with a number of, the open source database that we have, and even the, proprietary ones like your Microsoft SQL Server, Oracle database. I mean, it works with them. So here, if you want to use PostgreSQL to run your Moodle, all right, the minimum version is 13. But if you look at the recommended tab here, it says the latest version is even desirable if you can get your hands on the latest version. If you want to run MySQL, 8.0 is the minimum, but of course the latest version is always preferred. And if you want to go with MariaDB, which is, similar to MySQL, all right, the 10.67 version is the minimum. Of course, the latest version is recommended. And for Microsoft SQL Server, this 2017 version is the minimum. But if you have the latest version, that is also, all right, good. And you also have the Oracle database as well. And for the browser support, it actually supports the Chrome browser, the Firefox, Safari, and Edge. So basically, Moodle supports all the major, browsers that we have out there. Okay. Now, for the mobile, if you want to use Moodle on your mobile devices, I mean, Google Chrome is one of the, supported browsers, and mobile Safari, for those who are using Apple, is also, one of the browsers to use on the mobile. Okay, now these are the requirements that we need, all right, in order for us to run Moodle. Now, one thing I need to also mention here is that now, whether you are installing an application physically on a server without containerization, okay, the requirement is still the same at the end of the day. All right. So which means even if I'm not using containerization to run Moodle, I need to make sure that I still have all those requirements met. Which means if I'm installing Moodle on my physical machine, I need to have a database, whether it is Postgres or MySQL or MariaDB, whichever one, I need to have it installed. And I also need to have PHP installed on my local machine. Okay. And then other PHP extension will have to be enabled as well in order for me to be able to run my Moodle LMS application. So if I'm containerizing this application as well, that also means that part of what I would, write inside of my Docker file, okay, it must include, the PHP version, all right, the extensions that I want to enable, the database connection, and all of that, right? It has to be a part of the Docker file that I would write at the end of the day, okay? So whether you are containerizing or you are installing locally, the requirement is still the same. The only difference is that when you're containerizing, everything is basically running within a container, and that image that you're running as a container can actually be shipped anywhere and be, executed. Okay. And of course, and that container can also be discarded at any time. So the benefit of containerization is that you don't have to, change your system configuration and all of that to meet the requirement of the application that you're trying to install. Okay. So that is, the benefit of containerization. Okay. So now, since we understand the requirements, let's take a look at what the Docker file is going to look like. Okay. Now we have an understanding that this, particular application, it's an open source application that is built with PHP, and definitely it has to be installed, following the LAMP, setting. So there's a Linux, Apache, MySQL, and, PHP. That means the base image that we're going to use must have PHP and Apache installed in order for us to be able to use or deploy this particular Moodle LMS. And part of the Docker file will also include, an SQL client, maybe for MySQL or for Postgres and all of that. Okay, so now that we understand the requirements, let's get right into Visual Studio Code and let's see what the Docker file for this application looks like. All right, now this right here is the Docker file for this Moodle LMS application that we want to run. Now, if you look at what I have here, my Docker file is not named dockerfile. I changed the name to Moodle. All right. But my icon still remains because this icon basically tells me that this is what? A Docker file. Now, the content of the file is actually what matters, not the name of the file. Now, Dockerfile is the standard name, but it doesn't mean that your Docker file, all right, must be named so. Is that all right? So, Moodle is the name of my Docker file. Now, based on the content of that file, Visual Studio Code is still able to read the content and know exactly that this is a Docker file. Now, the only difference here is that when I'm building this file, all right, into an image, that means I have to explicitly say that my Docker file is this name. So I have to pass in the name of my Docker file. Is that okay? But then I just wanted you to know that your Docker file can be named differently. All right. It doesn't have to be Docker file. It can be named, all right, anything. The most important thing is the content of the file. Because by the time you do Docker run, Docker build and all of this, it is not the name that it actually works with. It is the content of the file that your Docker command actually works with. Is that okay? All right. So now we have this Docker file. So let me take you through this file. Now, we already have an understanding that our application is a PHP application. So what do? So to start our Docker file, we start with the base image of PHP 8.3 Apache. Now, you already know where we got this, base image from. We got it from Docker Hub. All right. There are multiple PHP versions. So if you come here to Docker Hub, all right, so this is Docker Hub, and this is the PHP, all right, official image right here. Now, if you click on tags, you have a number of tags, all right. Now, you have the 8.225, a lot of tags right here. But of course, I can say I'm looking for 8.3. All right, and it will show me the 8.3 that are available. So this is 8.3. If you scroll down here, you're going to find different 8.3 version. Now, but because I know that the application that I'm running requires the Apache web server, so I need a PHP that has, all right, the Apache web server installed with it already. Okay, so that is what we need. So here, if you scroll down here, all right, you're going to find the Apache somewhere here. So let's scroll down. Okay, so Blue Eyes, Alpine, Z, and all of that. So let's take a look and see if we're going to find. So we still have a long way to go there. All right, so you can still scroll down. All right, and there you go. So you have the 8.3, all right, 0.13 Apache, and then you have the Apache, all right, the bookworm version, okay, as well. All right. So the base image we're using is what? PHP 8.3 Apache. So that means we need PHP and we also need Apache. Is that okay? Now, when you're installing this application locally, all right, you also need to install some extensions, some dependencies. All right. Now, in the WordPress project that we did, we saw that our WordPress has a lot of PHP extensions that we needed to enable. Okay, so the same thing also happens here. Now, this PHP image that I'm using requires, it's actually built on top of a Debian, base image. And that is why if you look at the run command we're using here, we're saying apt-get update. That's an Ubuntu Debian kind of command, right? And the apt right here is the package manager for Debian and Ubuntu. So that tells you that this base image that we're using was actually built on top, all right, of maybe Debian or Ubuntu, right? Either of the two. Because, it's Ubuntu and Debian that uses the apt package manager. All right. So here you have the apt-get and then you have the apt-get install. Now you already know that when you're dealing with Ubuntu, you have to update your package manager first before you go ahead and do any kind of installation. And that is exactly what we're doing here. So apt-get update and then apt-get install. Now, one thing you will look at here is that you have double ampersand right here and then a backslash. So the backslash basically means, this command is not the only command that I want to run. All right, there are still other commands after this. And that is why you will see here that even after the apt-get install -y, okay, you still have your, backslash, basically telling, Docker that, there are other commands that I still want to execute. By the time you get to the last line, that is where the backslash is going to stop. Is that okay? All right. So now all of these things that we're installing, apt-get install, these are basically just, extensions and dependencies that our Moodle LMS requires to function. Is that okay? And this hyphen no install recommends basically means do not install, all right, any kind of recommendation apart from the things that I want to install. Okay, which means what I want to install, for example, is unzip. Just give me unzip. Don't install anything extra. Okay, that is what it means. So that is no install recommend. So any kind of recommendations or any extra dependencies, I really don't need those. Okay, what I want to install is unzip, git, call, and these other things. So those are the things that I want you to install, all right, for me. Okay, so now if you look at this one also, Docker PHP, all right, extension configure GD, all right, GD basically is for images when you're dealing with PHP. And of course, if you go to your if you go to the PHP Docker Hub page and you scroll down, you're basically going to see, examples on how to use the image. All right. So all the things that you see in the Docker file were not things that, we just offloaded from, from the brain and all of that. They are things that you can actually see inside of the documentation. Is that okay? So inside of the documentation here, if you look at it very well, you can see the Docker PHP, all right, source extract. Okay. You can see the Docker PHP, all right, extension configure GD. Now, all these things are the dependencies, extensions that are required by our application. All right, I can't emphasize that enough because every application that you see has a requirement. So what WordPress is going to require is different from what Moodle LMS is going to require, even though both applications are built, all right, with PHP. So the fact that they are built with PHP does not mean that they have the same requirement. So we need to understand that. Okay, so each application will have its own requirement, and that is why it is always good to reference, okay, the documentation of the application you're trying to install. Even the ones that you built in-house, your developers, all right, must write a documentation that the sysadmin, the DevOps engineer, and everybody can actually follow to understand how the application should, all right, be installed. Is that okay? So all the things that we see here are basically extensions and dependencies that our application, all right, requires. Okay, and right here you see apt-get clean. Basically, after I've installed all the things I'm installing, I'm basically trying to clean up my repository, all right, for any kind of unwanted files. And then if you look at what you have here, rf, so I'm basically removing, all this, all the repositories that have been downloaded as part of, where the apt, package manager has fetched some dependencies for. So I'm removing that just to make sure that my final image, all right, is lighter and all of that. Now here you have a git command. Now if you go back to the documentation of this application and you come to home, if you click on download Moodle LMS, now there are different ways to install the Moodle LMS. Okay, you can actually download the tar.gzip file or the zip file, and you can also install it via Git as well, and that is the approach that we, all right, are taking. So if I click on obtain via Git, I'm going to see some information here or some instruction. So now if you scroll down, it says obtaining the code from Git, because if you look at my Visual Studio Code, I really don't have any folder here called Moodle LMS where I'm copying, all right, something into my Docker file, right? I'm not copying anything. Okay, so now since I can actually install this application using Git, why not just put everything inside the Docker file instead of downloading the folder and then copying the content of the folder into the Docker file, right? I can actually just execute everything within the Docker file itself. And that is exactly the approach that I'm taking right here. Okay, so now this is the instruction that you have here. So first of all, you have to clone, and this is the command, all right, to clone the Git repository. Okay, now if you've been following this class for a long time, all right, you already know what git clone is, okay, because we actually started from the basics. So you can watch the previous videos to basically understand what git clone is about. So git clone, and then when you do git clone, you basically change directory into the Moodle directory, because that is what you have actually cloned. And inside of that, you can run these commands that you see right here. And if you come here, that's basically what we are doing here. So here I have git clone, and then I'm cloning this, and then I'm doing cd, all right, into the Moodle directory that has been cloned. Okay, and then I'm doing git branch, which is basically, what I saw here. So it's just, the idea is basically just copying all of these things here and then putting it inside of my Docker file. Okay, like we already know, the run keyword here will basically help you to execute commands. All right, if there are commands you want to execute within your Docker file when you're building an image from it, the run keyword, the run instruction is actually what you use to do that. Okay, So basically that's all I'm doing. Now, after I have cloned, okay, the folder and all of that, and then here I am running another Linux command, which is copy. So what I'm doing is that I am copying everything, because right here I said cd into Moodle. So which means after this particular line, anything that I'm doing right here is actually inside of the Moodle directory. All right. So what I've now done is to say copy everything that is in my current working directory, and that is what this line basically is about. And I'm copying that into var www/html, because I mean we're dealing with Apache, and the default folder directory where Apache serves its content from is actually the var www/html. Is that okay? So I'm basically copying everything that is inside of this Moodle, all right, directory into the HTML directory. Okay, that's what I'm doing. And right here, this is part of the requirement that we saw. So echo max input equals to 5,000. So if you go back to the documentation again, I mean, we actually saw that right here. It says the PHP setting max must be greater or equal to 5,000. And that is exactly what we're doing right here. And of course, your Moodle LMS also has what you call the up catch. All right, which basically is to catch, certain scripts. Okay, so that anytime you have to execute a script, or anytime Moodle has to execute a script, all right, for whatever reason, it doesn't recompile them, all right, all over again. And that is what the up catch, all right, or the OP catch is basically used for. And you can see the commands right here. So these are things that you can get in documentation, all right, and online as well. Now, another thing here is that we are creating what you call a Moodle data. Now, the Moodle data is basically with the directory where Moodle stores some data, all right, that the application actually requires to function. So we are creating that. And of course, Moodle can actually create this folder, but we want to preempt that creation. So we're creating that directory. And right now we have the working directory, or the work dir, which basically means that this is the directory that we want to work inside of. Okay, and then we're setting some permissions right here, okay, to basically allow us to, run this application on the web and all of that. And then of course, we're exposing port 80 because it's an Apache web server, and Apache is accessible by default on port 80. So we're opening that up automatically. So this is our Docker file. All right, and we're going to build this. In the last video, we saw how to actually build, all right, a Docker file into an image using Docker Compose. And we're actually going to be doing the same thing today, but of course with some extra, all right, configuration as well. Now, let's take a look at our Docker Compose file, okay? Because as you already know, this application needs a database. And just like we looked at the Node.js application where we installed the Mongo database and the Mongo Express, in this case, we're going to be using a Postgres database. And we're also going to be installing the PG, all right, admin 4, which is actually the GUI, all right, tool for managing your Postgres database. Is that okay? So let's take a look at the Docker Compose file. So here, I have the services, and then I have the name of the service. So Moodle app, build, context. Now, in the last video, we saw something around this context and Docker file, but of course, I didn't go into that. But today, I want to delve into that. So here, my context basically means, all right, I said dots, because my Docker file is actually in the current working directory. So that's the dot. And then here, now, since I have changed my Docker file, all right, my Docker file is no longer Docker file. It's no longer the standard name. So I'm basically saying Docker file and then the name of my Docker file. So the name of my Docker file right here is what? Is Moodle. And that is basically what I'm passing in right here. And like we saw in the last video, we're specifying the image name so that by the time Docker Compose actually builds an image, all right, from the Docker file, it's going to give it this name, not just any arbitrary, all right, name. And of course, we're specifying the container name as well. And right here, we want it to be accessible on port 8080. So the container port is 80, the host port is also 80, all right? For the host port, you can actually use any port as far as no container or no service is using that port, all right, already. And then for the volume, all right, so we are basically mapping this Moodle data, which we saw in the, all right, in the Docker file. So this particular directory, is what we are actually mounting to this particular volume. All right. And then we said that this depends on what? On the Postgres database. Okay. Now for the Postgres database, we also got the image, all right, from Docker Hub. So right here is your Postgres, all right, official image. And if you scroll down also, you have different tags, version 17, I think that's the latest. Okay. And if you look at what you have here, all right, these are the tags, and these are information about how to run your Postgres, all right, database, okay? And one particular environment variable that is actually necessary is the Postgres, all right, password, okay? And that is exactly what we're specified here. So the Postgres password, we're using Moodle_password. Now we're going to run this Docker compose file like this, but at coding your password and username like this is actually not best practice. But in the next video, we're going to see how to manage, all right, environment variable using variables, all right, and then using what you call the Docker secrets. We're going to look at that in the next video. But for now, let's see how to deploy this application. Let's understand, what we're trying to do here. And then in the next video, we'll see how to, use variable instead of at coding our credentials, all right, inside of the Docker file, which is best practice actually. So here, I'm going to use the latest since, Moodle has advised us to always go with latest versions. So I'm going to use 17. So I'm going to change this one here to 17 Alpine. All right, so I'm using Alpine because Alpine image is lightweight. Okay, so that's why we're going with Alpine. So the Postgres, so the DB, I want to create a DB by default. So the DB name is going to be Moodle. That is what my Moodle application is going to use. And then the Postgres user for this Moodle DB is Moodle_user. The password is also Moodle_password. And of course, I am also creating a volume, all right, mount. So my Postgres database actually stores its own data inside of Valley Postgres SQL/data. For the Node.js application, when we looked at the MongoDB stores its own data in data/db. So for Postgres, it is Valley Postgres SQL/data. Okay. And then now for the pgadmin, which is actually, all right, the GUI to manage your, PostgreSQL database. If you come here, this is the site, all right, for pgadmin. And of course, if you come here to download, you can actually download it for Windows, for Mac, for different Linux versions. And of course, you can also have it as what? As a container as well. Okay, so if you wanted to see the file, you can also just click here on Docker Hub, and that will basically take you to this particular page. All right, so this is the page for your pgadmin, which is the GUI to manage your Postgres database. Okay, so we have that here as well. So we're specifying the image. So the Postgres, the pgadmin 4 also runs on port 80. So that's why we're changing the port name here to 81 instead of 80. And of course, you need to pass in this pgadmin default email, all right, like this. So here I can change this one to, let's say, localhost. Okay, and then the default password, you can leave it as admin, but like I said, in the next video, we're going to see how to basically use a variable instead of hard coding the values, all right, like this. Okay, and then we're saying here that this depends on Postgres. I explained that in the last video, that depends basically means this container will start before this other container will start. That's what it means. And then of course we're defining our volume out here. So we have two volumes, PG data and Moodle data. So these two volumes will be created and mounted accordingly to the right, all right, container. Is that okay? So that is basically a walkthrough of the Docker compose file and then our Moodle, all right, Docker file. So let's go ahead now and let's build, all right, this the Moodle Docker file, and of course, let's start up all our containers all at once. Like I said, we're going to see some other extra, some extra options that we can actually use with Docker Compose. So right now, I'm going to say Docker Compose. Now, in the last video, we basically just did Docker Compose up-d. That was what we did. And then it built, all right, the Moodle image, it built the Node.js image and then started the database and, of course, the Mongo Express, okay? But this time around, and when it was building the image, when we're doing the Node application, it showed us an error and it says, it couldn't pull, all right, that image, because it was assuming that the image that we specified was that it should pull something from Docker Hub, okay? So in order to not, basically see that error, we can actually just come here and say Docker Compose up -build, okay, and then -d. Okay, so what we are doing now is basically to tell Docker Compose that, hey, you have a Docker file to build before you start, all right, the other containers. Okay, so that way it's not going to give us that error that we saw, basically telling us that, pulling image and all of that. Okay, so Docker Compose with this command will basically know that, I have to build an image first, and then I start all the other services as a container. Is that okay? So let's press enter and let's see what we have. So I'm going to pause my screen here, and when I come back, we'll continue from where we stopped. Okay? Welcome back, guys. So if you look at what you have here, it basically pulled the image, all right, built the Moodle image as well. Okay, and then you can see here that the network was started, 2 volumes were created, and 3 containers were also started. So if I come here and I do Docker, all right, compose PS, okay, I can see, all right, okay, I think I'm seeing 2 containers here. So what's the issue? Okay, all right, so I'm seeing the Postgres 17, and I am seeing, all right, the Moodle, all right, 1.0. So let's go over to Docker desktop and let's find out what happened to the PG admin. Okay. So the Postgres started and the Moodle, all right, the Moodle LMS also started. So the PG admin exited. So let's see what happened. Okay. Email config is false. Allow special email domains. Oh, okay. It says does not appear to be a valid email address. And it says please reset the PG admin default environment variable and try again. Okay. All right. So that's understandable. And the reason for that is because we specified local host instead of, a normal email address. Like, so we could have said something like, admin@adminmovie.com or something, right? That would have made a lot more sense. Okay. So that was actually the complaint. So we can come here and say Docker, all right, compose down, all right, and then when I do Docker Compose down, I can actually also delete all the volumes. So when you do Docker Compose down, what it will do is that it's going to stop the containers, and it's also going to delete all the containers. Now, if I don't want to retain the volumes as well, okay, all I can do is to say -, volumes, all right, and that would also delete all the volumes, okay, that I created as well. So I'm going to press enter. So that's going to stop and remove. So if you look at what you have here, all the containers were removed, all the volumes were also removed. Okay, now if I do Docker, all right, volumes, ls, oops, that's volume, not volumes. Okay, all right, now I can see that I can't find any of those volumes. Okay, so now let's build again, all right, and then let's start it up. All right, so that was quick. So now let's do Docker compose ps. All right, so now I can see that I have my 3 applications up and running. Is that okay? So that's a good one there. So let's log in into the PG admin and let's see what it looks like. Okay. So here, if I come here now, I can see that my PG admin is up and running. All right. So if I come here now, I can see here it says application initialization. All right. And of course, everything is working as expected. Okay, so starting blah, 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 and then everything is working. And if you come here to your Postgres database as well, you can also see that it says that the database system is ready to accept connection. Is that okay? And of course, if you come here to your Moodle web also, all right, the Apache also has also started. All right, so let's take a look. So the PG admin is running on port 81. So we can come here and say, all right, localhost 81. And right here, we can see our Postgres, all right, admin database, okay? So this is the PG admin. So the email, it's going to be, all right, this one, admin@admin.com. All right, that's the email. So let's put that, and the password is going to be admin, okay? And then we'll press enter. And right here and right now, we have been able to access our PG, all right, admin, which is the interface for the Postgres SQL, all right? So now if I click here, I don't have any server connected. So I can come here right here and say register server. So the name of the server, let's just call it Postgres. And then I'll click on the connection. So the connection is going to be the name of the container. Okay. And that is going to be what? Postgres. Okay. And then maintenance database, we can leave that. So the username, we can get that from here. So the username we're using is Moodle_user. All right. So let's say Moodle_user. All right, and the password, all right, and then we click on save, And right now we've been able to connect to the Postgres database. Okay. So if you expand database, you can see your Moodle database right here. If I click on it, I can see that it says here, all right, it says right here, the database has been connected. So if I, all right, expand the schema, I can see that right now I don't really have any table because, I mean, I've not installed my application just yet. Okay. So let's go ahead and let's install, all right, our Moodle LMS application. So I'm going to come here and say localhost. I mean, that is working on port 8080, right? It's port 80. Okay. I'm going to press enter. And let's see what we have. So right now, this is your Moodle LMS, all right, installation page. I'm going to say next. All right, I'm going to confirm the path. And right now, I'm going to select PostgreSQL because that's the database that I have, all right, that I'm using. Okay, of course, you can see that. You can even use the Aurora MySQL, which is AWS proprietary database, right? And then you can use MySQL, you can use MariaDB, but of course we have PostgreSQL, so that's what I'm going to select. I'm going to click on next. So now I need to put in my database connection settings. So the host is Postgres. Database name is Moodle, like we can see from here. The DB name is Moodle, all right. And then the username is Moodle_user. The password is Moodle, all right, _password. Okay, and the port is 5432. That's the Postgres port. All right, and then you say next, and if everything is fine, all right, we shouldn't have any kind of issues. So if everything is fine, you should find yourself on this page, and then you click on continue. All right, now if everything was installed correctly, then you should see the server check. And then if you look at the status, it says okay, because all these extensions were actually installed and enabled. Okay, so you can see that everything says okay. And if you look at the requirement here, it says for the database, we have 17.0 database installed, but of course the minimum requirement is what, 13. And for PHP, the minimum requirement is 8.1, but we have 8.3.13 installed. All right. And then it says the status is what? Is okay. The only thing that is not okay is the fact that, I mean, this site is not running as HTTPS site. I mean, which is fine. All right. That can be changed later on. All right. And then I'll come here to say continue. And that would, you know, create all the necessary tables that needs to be, all right, created. So this installation is going to create, I mean, about 458 tables. Okay. If I'm correct on that, it's going to create 458 tables. All right, inside the database. And if you go to the database, you can see some activities. All right, you can see some database sections, some tuple in, you can see some tuple out, you can see some block, all right, input and output, and then you can see some transaction per second. I mean, you can see an activity. So that tells you that something is going on, all right, with our database, okay? And that is why you can see all these, you know, activities that you can see right here. If you click on state, all right, so you can see something here. All right, something is being connected. So the state says active. All right, configuration. If you click on logs, all right, you may not be able to see anything, but if you click on activities back, all right, you can see some activities going on because the installation is actually installing, you know, some tables and all of that. All right, so the installation has been completed. So if I go back to the PG admin, all right, and I try to refresh, okay, so let's reload. And let's see what we have. So if I come here, all right, and I try to go back, so you can see, oops, all right, I said 458 tables, okay? But you can see that we have 494, all right, tables. I mean, I said 4 something, so 494 tables. So these are the, all right, tables, all right, for application. So for those who are database administrators, all right, within the organization, they will have to know how to query, all right, all those tables, whatever it is they want to do. So if they need some information about the user, they can right click here, click on view data, click on all rows, and that basically shows you the rows, all right, and all your users that you have created. So we only have 2 users, the guest and admin, and the password for the admin has not been all right, you know, done already because it says admin setup, all right, pending. So if I come back here and I click on continue, all right, and that will take me to the login page where I need to configure, all right, my admin. So right here, I need to put in a password. All right, and then I need to put an email. Email is actually very compulsory, so you need to put an email right here. All right, so and then you can say continue. Okay, and that would basically update your admin password. All right, and then take you to some other places. So here I can say cloud. all right, and DevOps. So that's going to be the site name. And then, of course, we have a cohort coming up in 2025. So we're going to put that right there. And then, of course, you can put your email as well here. So I'm just going to use an arbitrary email, all right, for all of these. Okay, save changes. And that's literally all that you have to do. And then you have your website up and running. So if you look at the PG admin, if I refresh this page again, all right, and then I go back to the, all right, table, the user table that we saw earlier. Okay, now I should see that my admin password has been populated. Is that okay? So if I come here again and I say view data, all rows, all right, I can see that my, all right, admin password has actually been, encrypted. All right, so you can see that right here. And of course, if you want to run any query, you can run your queries right here. Of course, you can click here to open up a new query tab and then run whatever query you want to run right here. So that's for the database guys. Okay. So right now you have your application running. If you click on site administration, your Moodle LMS site is up and running. If you click on server, you can basically see the environment and see all the things that you installed. All right. If you click on reports, you can basically come here and click on system status. And then it tells you that, your system is okay. Everything is running fine, except the fact that cron is not being set up already. Okay. That's part of the whole application configuration. All right. So the Moodle LMS for my own that I'm using is this one right here. And for those that will be joining us for the 2025 DevOps cohort and DevSecOps cohort, all right, we're going to be using this particular Moodle site, all right, to share course resources and to upload videos and materials that you need. Okay, and that is what I just demonstrated to us here by installing the same Moodle application locally using the concept of containerization. And I believe that you have learned something, all right, significant from today's session. And of course, if I want to bring this down, I can just say Docker, all right, compose down, and then -, volumes. And that will basically delete all the containers and delete all the volumes, all right, as well. Like I said, in the next video, we're going to look at how to use environment variable to basically protect our passwords. And of course, we're going to look at Docker secrets as well. So thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you on the next one.